Hello and welcome. Today we are going to look at this story called Going Places, written by A.R. Barton, who is a writer who lives in Zurich and writes in English. Now, Going Places is quite a fascinating story with which many of you, your age students, should actually be able to relate to because it talks about daydreaming, it talks about khayali pulav, it talks about imagination, wild imagination, and basically trying to live out your fantasies, something which is not possible in real life. You try to imagine and think, many of us would have thought about it. I'm sure each one of you would have thought about it. I have, how would it be if one was a topper? If one were a topper, and you imagine and you use that to motivate yourself, you think that it's possible and you like the whole feel of it, right? And that's how you kind of inspire and motivate yourself in order to strive for it, so that you work hard to achieve what you are really daydreaming about. Okay, so dreams is important. वो सीक्रेट सुपरस्टार में एक डायलॉग है ना कि सपने देखना तो सबको अलाउड होना चाहिए. Each one of us should actually daydream. It's important, and then try to make those dreams into a reality. Okay, so let's get started. The principal character in this particular story is this girl called Sophie. When I leave, Sophie said, coming home from school, I am going to have a boutique. So that was her ambition. That is something which she wanted to have a boutique of her own. So this is important. Jansie linking arms with her, that is holding arms with her along the street. Now, Jansie was her classmate and an extremely close friend. Looked doubtful. And she is, in fact, I have written one of the answers on the contrast between Sophie and Jansie. While Jansie is a more realistic kind of person, Sophie is given to daydreaming and a lot of imagination. Takes money, Soph, something like that. I will find it, staring far down the street. Take you a long time to save that much. So he is thinking in very practical terms. Sophie is saying ki, ho jayega. Well, I'll be a manager then. Yes, of course, to begin with, till I have got enough. But anyway, I know just how it is all going to look. So she's imagining how her boutique is going to look. Okay, so she's thinking of her goal. She's not thinking of the journey to achieve that goal, to reach that goal. But she likes the look and feel of that goal. I will be like Mary Quant. Sophie said, I will be a natural. They will see it from the start. I will have the most amazing shop the city has ever seen. Jansie, knowing they were both earmarked for the biscuit factory where they worked, became melancholy. Melancholy means she became a little sad. Okay, she wished Sophie would not say such things. When they reached Sophie's street, Jansie said, that is where her house was. Jansie said, it's only a few months away now, Soph. You really should be sensible. They don't pay very well for shop work. You know that your dad would never allow it. Or an actress, she's not even listening to her. Sophie is not even listening to what Jansie has to advise. Now there is real money in it. So you realize that Sophie, since she does not come from a very well-off family, nor does Jansie, she's kind of aspiring to have a lot of money. So she thinks that as an actress, she will have a lot of money. Yes, and I could maybe have the boutique on the side. Actresses don't work full-time, do they? Anyway, that or a fashion designer, something a bit sophisticated. So she has three professions in mind: an actress, a boutique owner, or a fashion designer. And she turned in through the open street door, leaving Jansie standing in the rain. So she enters her home. If ever I come into money, I'll buy a boutique. I come into money. Come into money means that if I ever find a lot of money, if I become rich. That's a phrase which you should be knowing, that what does this phrase mean? If I come into money means that if I become rich. If you ever come into money, you will buy us a blessed, decent house to live in. Thank you very much. Now, Sophie's father was scooping shepherd's pie into his mouth as hard as he could. His plump face still grimy and sweat marked from the day. So she was involved in labor. So that's what this thing. So it is possible that this particular dialogue right, is said by the father. That's what it looks like, because immediately the father is introduced. She thinks money grows on trees. वो बोलते हैं ना कि पैसे क्या पेड़ पे उगते हैं. So this is a very literal translation, right? Just the way we say it in Hindi. Don't she, Dad? Said little Derek, hanging on the back of his father's chair. Their mother sighed. Sophie watched her back stooped over the sink and wondered at the incongruity of the delicate bow which fastened her apron string. So the apron which is tied from the back, so the bow which is made, she's thought it was very incongruous, means it was not perfect. It was not the way it should really be tied together. The delicate seeming bow and the crooked back, so it did not make for a very pleasant sight, according to Sophie. The evening had already blacked in the windows, and the small room was steamy from the stove and cluttered with the heavy breathing man in his vest at the table and the dirty washing piled up in the corner. So you see the image of an extremely, what does it kind of convey? It conveys a very untidy kind of a house, unwashed clothes lying in one corner, the heavy breathing man in his vest. So, he's looking sweaty, he's looking grimy. The little child is trying to play on the back of the chair. It's dark outside. The small room is steamy because of all the cooking or the stove work which is going on. And Sophie is not feeling very happy with her immediate circumstances. Sophie felt a tightening in her throat. She went to look for her brother, Jeff, who is her other brother. He was kneeling on the floor in the next room, tinkering with a part of his motorcycle over some newspaper spread on the carpet. He was 3 years out of school, an apprentice mechanic. Apprentice is someone who is kind of, undergoing some kind of training, traveling to his work each day to the far side of the city. So it's, he has to travel quite a lot in order to go to his place of work. He was almost grown up now, and she suspected areas of his life about which she knew nothing, about which he never spoke. So she was curious to know about his life, but he was an introvert, wasn't given to talking too much. So she did not really know about the kind of life, the little details about the kind of life he led, at work. He said little at all ever voluntarily. Words had to be prized out of him. Prized means, they had to be really, nikalna padta tha, it took an effort to get words and information out of Jeff, like stones out of the ground. And she was jealous of his silence. Because she was obviously a garrulous sort, someone who talked a lot, whereas the brother was the exact opposite. When he wasn't speaking, it was as though he was away somewhere out there in the world, in those places she had never been. Whether they were only the outlying districts of the city or places beyond in the surrounding country, who knew? So she could never imagine what was going on in his mind, because he never expressed his thoughts. They attained a special fascination. So she was very fascinated and curious to know what was going on in his mind. So you realize that, there is that element of a bit of a hero worship of kind, which she has with another person also later on in the story. They attained a special fascination simply because they were unknown to her and remained out of her reach. It was not in her reach, so she felt more and more curious about it. Perhaps there were also people, exotic, interesting people, of whom he never spoke. It was possible, though he was quiet and did not make new friends easily. She longed to know them. She longed to know who were his friends. So you realize that she's a very curious cat kind of a person. She's very curious about her brother and the kind of life he led. She wished she could be admitted more deeply into her brother's affections, and he was not a very affectionate sort. So she wanted him to be more affectionate and loving towards her, which he was not. And that someday he might take her with him. Though their father forbade it, and Jeff had never expressed an opinion, she knew he thought her too young. And she was impatient. She was conscious of a vast world out there waiting for her, and she knew instinctively that she would feel as at home there as in the city, which had always been her home. So she was you realize that she's a very confident kind of a sort. He's the silent types, right? It expectantly awaited her arrival, that she thought that the world is waiting for her, It's like that Kareena Kapoor dialogue, "Main apni sabse favorite hu," right? Isn't that the dialogue? So it's like that, you are in love with yourself and you think the world is waiting for you. It's a great state to be in, no doubt, in the sense that you think very good about yourself. And it's also important, I mean, I must tell you, children, that it's also important to feel good about yourself. And I'll tell you why. No one will actually love you more than you love yourself. It applies to each one of us. And yes, of course, our parents love us. Okay, your parents would love you more than they love themselves also. But you love yourself the most. You will be the most concerned about yourself, right? And I think we all need to love ourselves, show some love to ourselves, because we need it, because it's a very harsh, toxic world outside. So थोड़ा अपने आप को प्यार करो, उसमें कोई गलती नहीं है. ओके, थोड़ा अपने आप को पैम्पर करो, उसमें कोई भी गलती नहीं है. ओके, anyway, let's get back to going places. She saw herself riding there behind Jeff on his bike. He wore new shining black leathers and she a yellow. So she's kind of imagining. She's imagining the detail. Her imagination has a lot of detail, saying that, she thinks that, oh, she would be wearing this, he would be wearing black leathers, she would be wearing a yellow dress with a cape that flew out behind. So much of detail. There was a kind of applause as the world rose to greet them. So she wants to be an achiever and she thinks the world will kind of appreciate and applaud for them. He sat frowning. Now she comes back to the reality from her world of imagination. He sat frowning at the oily component he cradled in his hands as though it was some small dumb animal and he was willing it to speak. I met Danny Casey. Where? In the arcade, funnily enough. Arcade is like the front part of, let's say, a shopping mall or some kind of big premises. The arcade, where there would be a bit of greenery, etc. It's never true. I did too. You told Dad? She shook her head, chastened at his unawareness. Chastened means a little taken aback and not really liking it, that he always was the first to share her secrets. I don't believe it. She thought he would know, that he would be always the first one to know her secret. And he kind of, does Dad know it? I don't believe it. There I was looking at the clothes in Royce's window when someone came in and stood beside me, and I looked around, and who should it be but Danny Casey. Now he's a footballer. All right, what does he look like? Now he's kind of interrogating her. Oh, come on, you know what he looks like. Close to, I mean. Well, he has green eyes, gentle eyes, and he's not as tall as you would think. She wondered if she should say about his teeth, but decided against it. Because, and why she's able to think about the teeth, because you realized even earlier about the bike ride, that she's able to think in a lot of detail. Her imagination is, what's the word you should use? Her imagination is very vivid. It's very detailed. She goes into a lot of detail while she's imagining and fantasizing. Their father had washed when he came in, and his face and arms were shiny and pink, and he smelt of soap. He switched on the television, tossed one of little Derek's shoes from his chair onto the sofa, and sat down with a grunt. Sophie met Danny Casey, Jeff said. Sophie wriggled where she was sitting at the table. Now, she did not expect her brother to be revealing that information which had been told in secret to their father. Her father turned his head on his thick neck to look at her. His expression was one of disdain. Disdain means not liking it. Disdain is a slightly milder version of disgust. Okay, disdain means, he's not approving of it. It's true, Jeff said. I once knew a man who had known Tom Finney. His father said reverently to the television. Now, Tom Finney is another player, but that was a long time ago. You told us, Jeff said. Casey might be as that good someday. Better than that even. He's the best. If he keeps his head on his shoulders, what does that mean? If he does not get carried away, if you get a bit of fame, people get carried away and think that I'm the best, and then they're not grounded. Their feet are not on the ground. उड़ने लगते हैं और अपना खेल बिगाड़ देते हैं. So he says that if he keeps his head on his shoulders, if they look after him properly, because there are a lot of distractions for a youngster in the game these days. So his father obviously knows a lot about, how youngsters could get distracted from what they should focus on, and lose their head. He'll be all right. He's with the best team in the country. He's very young yet. He's older than I am. Too young really for the first team. You can't argue with that sort of ability. So obviously, they think that he's very good. He's going to buy a shop, Sophie said from the table. Her father grimaced. Grimaced means he's making another expression, which is not a very positive kind of an expression. Where did you hear that? He told me so. He muttered something inaudible and dragged himself round in his chair. This another one of your wild stories? Now, this is important because it shows that the father does not believe his daughter. He knows that Sophie is given to wild imagination. So he's calling it one of her wild stories. She met him in the arcade. Now, Jeff is a little more believing. He doesn't know about his sister's tendency to kind of invent stories, make up stories, and told him how it had been. One of these days you are going to talk. One of these days you are going to talk yourself into a lot of trouble, her father said aggressively. Jeff knows it's true, don't you, Jeff? He don't believe you, though he would like to. Okay, he's not believing, though he would like to believe, but he's also not believing you. The table lamp cast an amber. Amber means slightly yellowish glow over her brother's bedroom wall and across the large poster of United's first team squad and the row of colored photographs beneath, 3 of them of the young Irish prodigy, Casey. Promise you will tell no one, Sophie said. Nothing to tell, is there? Promise, Jeff, Dad would murder me, only if he thought it was true. Please, Jeff. Christ, Sophie, you are still in school. Casey must have a string of girls, that he must be having lots of girlfriends. No, he doesn't. How could you know that? He told me, that's how. As if anyone would tell a girl something like that, right? So he's not kind of believing what she's telling him right now. Yes, he did. He isn't like that. He's quiet. So she's now kind of imagining that she could be his girlfriend, Casey's girlfriend. It was nothing like that. Not as quiet as all that, apparently. And because he says he's quiet, he says not as quiet. It was nothing like that, Jeff. It was me who spoke first. When I saw who it was, I said, excuse me, but aren't you Danny Casey? And he looked sort of surprised and he said, yes, that's right. And I knew it must be him because he had the accent, like when they interviewed him on the television. So I asked him for an autograph for little Derek, the younger brother, but neither of us had a pen or a paper. So we just talked about for a bit. And she's seeing the details, because if she had said that I got an autograph for Derek, they would say, okay, shows that autograph. So she would have had to kind of invent the autograph also. So she very conveniently says, neither of us had a pen or a paper. After all, it's a long way from the west of about the clothes in Roy's window. He seemed lonely. After all, it's a long way from the west of Ireland. And then just as he was going, he said, if I could care to meet him next week, he would give an autograph then. And of course, I said I would. So she's now telling him that she has actually fixed up for a date with Casey. And she does not want Jeff to say that to their father. As if he would show up, means as if he would turn up for the date. You do believe me now, don't you? He dragged his jacket, which was shiny and shapeless, from the back of the chair and pushed his arms into it. She wished he paid more attention to his appearance. Wished he cared more about clothes. He was tall with a strong, dark face, handsome, she thought. So she thought her brother was quite handsome, but she also wished he would take a little more care over his appearance and his attire, his clothes. It's the unlikeliest thing I ever heard. So he does not believe this part of the story that Sophie has told him. On Saturday, they made their weekly pilgrimage. Pilgrimage means that it is not necessarily to a temple, to watch United. So pilgrimage is something which they go regularly. There are many families which go to a temple every week. So it's like a pilgrimage, means they were very devoted to the game of football. Sophie and her father and little Derek went down near the goal. Jeff, as always, went with his mates higher up. United won 2-0 and Casey drove in the second goal, a blend of innocence and Irish genius, going round the 2 big defenders on the edge of the penalty area with their father screaming for him to pass and beating the hesitant goalkeeper from a dozen yards. So you see, they're very animated and very involved in the game. Sophie glowed with pride. Afterwards, Jeff was ecstatic. You see, what she's doing is that she's in her own dream world. She's imagining that she's going to go on a date with this Casey, who she has spoken to him a few days earlier. It's all in her mind. It's all imagination, right? But she's allowing him herself to imagine so much that she believes it is real, and she feels happy in her success. I wish he was an Englishman, someone said on the bus. Ireland will win the World Cup, little Derek told his mother when Sophie brought him home. Her father was gone to the pub to celebrate. What is this you have been telling? Jansie said, next week. About what? Your Jeff told our Frank that you met Danny Casey. Now, Jansie is always with Sophie. So where could she have met him separately is what Jansie is curious about. This wasn't an inquisition, just Jansie being nosy, but Sophie was startled. Okay, so she's just being curious. Oh, that. Jansie frowned. Yes, that. Sensing that she was covering. Now Sophie is thinking of what she should tell Jansie in order to ensure that she did not think she was bluffing. Well, yes, I did. You never did. Sophie glared at the ground. Damn that Jove. This was a Jove thing, not a Jansie thing. It was meant to be something special just between them, something secret. It wasn't a Jansie thing at all. It was not meant to be revealed to Jansie. Tell gawky Jansie, something like that, and the whole neighborhood. So she was used to kind of telling secrets everywhere around, and Sophie did not want to be the butt of jokes. Damn that Jove was nothing sacred. She expected him to keep her secret. It's a secret meant to be. I'll keep a secret, Soph. You know that. I wasn't going to tell anyone. There will be a right old row. If my row means ghar par bawal mat jayega, there will be a fight at home if my dad gets to hear about it. So she now tells him that dad doesn't know about it, and therefore she doesn't want to reveal anything. Jansie blinked. A row? I would have thought he would be chuffed as anything. I would be thinking that he would be happy his daughter has met Casey because he's such a big fan. She realized then that Jansie did not know about the date bit. Jeff had not told her about that. Maybe because Jeff himself did not believe that part of her story. She breathed more easily. So Jeff had not let her down after all. He believed in her after all. After all, some things might be sacred. It was just a little thing, really. I asked him for an autograph, but we did not have any paper or pen, so it was no good. How much had Jeff said? Jesus, I wish I had been there. I would have been there. Of course, my dad did not want to believe it. You know what a misery he is. But the last thing I need is queues of people around our house asking him, what is all this about Danny Casey? He would murder me, and you know how my mom gets when there is a row. Jansie said, hushed. You can trust me, Soph. You know that. Sophie did not trust her. After dark, she walked by the canal, along a sheltered path lighted only by the glare of the lamps from the wharf across the river. Now, wharf is a portion which is near a bay, the portion which leads to the waters. And the unceasing drone of the city, drone as in the sound of the city. Okay, drone refers to the unceasing, means, continuous kind of a sound, whatever kind of a sound, traffic sound, whatever, okay, of the city was muffled and distant. It was from a distance. It was a place she had often played in when she was a child. There was a wooden bench beneath a solitary elm. Now, elm is a tall tree with rough leaves, okay, where lovers sometimes came. She sat down to wait. It was the perfect place. She had always thought so for a meeting of this kind. So she thought this is the perfect place for a romantic date. For those who wished not to be observed, she knew he would approve. So she is in that world of her own imagination. For some while waiting, she imagined his coming. Now she's imagining him coming. She watched along the canal, seeing him come out of the shadows, imagining her own consequent excitement. So all this is playing out in her mind. Not until some time had elapsed did she begin balancing against this the idea of his not coming. Here I sit, she said to herself, wishing Danny would come, wishing he would come, and sensing the time passing. I feel the pangs of doubt stirring inside me. I watch for him, but still there is no sign of him. I remember Jeff saying he would never come, and how none of them believed me when I told them. I wonder what will I do? What can I tell them now if he does not come? But we know how it was, Danny and me. That's the main thing. So you see, she's kind of making herself. I used to have a colleague. he had this weird habit of imagining that, the whole world is against me. So he would come up with this very fancy kind of very wild theories. And you know how office politics can be, and it can be very difficult, because he would come up with these very wild allegations with a lot of details that this happened like this, whereas something like this would have never ever happened. Right? So everyone would have to say that, no, it didn't happen. Weren't you there? Did it anything of the sort happen at 5 p.m. on Thursday? They said, no, nothing of the sort happened. So he would be proved a liar. And then you realize that this guy, I mean, at least in his case, had some mind issues. He had this imagination where he always believed that the whole world is conspiring against him. Right? So he had to get treatment for something like that later on. But this can be very dangerous. Now, someone like Sophie out here, she's kind of in her world of imagination, that she believes that Danny would come, and she's therefore disappointed, even though one part of her knows that this is all her imagination. But she has convinced herself so much that Danny would come, that she starts actually feeling disappointed that he does not turn up. Right? So you realize this state of mind. I wouldn't say it's the same like the third level, but it's about a different kind of a state of mind. But we know how it was, Danny and me. That's the main thing. There was nothing between them, but she has kind of allowed herself to believe that there was indeed something between them. How can you help what people choose to believe? But all the same, it makes me despondent, means sad. This knowing I'll never be able to show them they are wrong to doubt me. She waited, measuring in this way the changes taking place in her. Resignation was no sudden thing. So this was kind of a very gradual process. Resignation means resigned to her fate, means acceptance of what it was. It was a gradual kind of a phase. I've written an answer specifically about this particular phrase also. Now I have become sad, she thought, and it is a hard burden to carry. This sadness. So she's now feeling very sad. And that's what happens, because you imagine all the good things happening to her, yourself, and then in reality it doesn't happen, and then you start feeling very despondent, very sad, very melancholy. Sitting here waiting and knowing he will not come, I can see the future and how I will have to live with this burden of not having him around. They, of course, will doubt me as they have always doubted me. But I will have to hold up my head, remembering how it was. Already I envisage the slow walk home and Jeff's disappointed face when I tell him he did not come, that Danny, and then he will fly out and slam the door. But we know how it was. I shall tell myself, Danny and me, it's a hard thing, this sadness. She climbed the crumbling steps to the street. Outside the pub, she passed her father's bicycle propped against the wall and was glad he would not be there when she got home. So when she's getting home, her father is not here. So she's happy because she's obviously not in the mood to kind of face her father. Excuse me, but aren't you Danny Casey? Coming through the arcade, she pictured him again outside Royce. So she wants to be in that phase where she has actually met him. She doesn't want to be in that phase where she feels like a loser. You get it? It's a strange kind of a mental state of mind. He turns readily. Yes, that's right. I watch you every week with my dad and my brothers. We think you are great. Oh, well, now that's very nice. I wonder, would you mind signing an autograph? His eyes are on the same level as your own. His nose is freckled and turns upwardly slightly, and then he smiles. He does so shyly, exposing teeth with gaps between. His eyes are green, and when he looks straight at you, they seem to shimmer. They seem gentle, almost afraid, like a gazelle. Gazelle is like a deer. Is a deer. Then you look away, you let his eyes run over you a little, and then you come back to find them slightly breathless. Okay. And he says, I don't seem to have a pen at all. So she wants to feel as though that whole feeling of romance. You realize you haven't either. My brothers will be very sorry. And afterwards, you wait there alone in the arcade for a long while, standing where he stood, remembering the soft, melodious voice, the shimmer of green eyes, no taller than you, no bolder than you, the prodigy, the innocent genius, the great Danny Casey. So please remember all these phrases that she uses for Danny Casey. You can use it in your answers. And she saw it all again last Saturday, saw him ghost past the lumbering defenders, ghost almost, going very fast, almost like an invisible kind of a force. He heard the 50,000 catch their breath as he hovered momentarily over the ball, and then the explosion of sound as he struck it crisply into the goal. and the sudden thunderous eruption of exultant approbation. Approbation means, do you know what this means? It means praise. Okay, so deliberately Barton has kind of left it open like that. He's left enough hints to know, for us to know that it's all playing in her mind, but she kind of imagines it in vivid detail. Okay, and that's what. So in contrast to Jansie, she's a dreamer. Jansie is a realist. People in her family, neither Geoff nor her father, believe her. So she's alone. She's a very lonely sort. But in order to fill her loneliness, she kind of imagines all these kind of things. In her own world, she has created a parallel world with the characters who are there also in her real world, imagining that they would all be doing good things to her. So she imagines herself as the heroine of her stories, and that obviously makes her feel very good. But at moments when she's in her real world, and when she realizes that these stories are not going to come true, that leads to her feeling extremely despondent. Okay, so please have a look at the notes. More than the notes are there, but the question and answers, and I hope there will be clarity. Any doubts, please ask anytime. Thank you very much. Tata, bye bye. God bless you.